In this video, we're digging up the history on this 1,500-mile 1970 Plymouth Superbird, which has been wearing this same psychedelic paint job for 50-plus years. And it carries some awesome drag racing history with it because this thing was a drag car from day one. And if that isn't already cool enough, this was a factory Hemi car. Even considering that these cars were designed for NASCAR, and specifically the super speedways in NASCAR, a small selection of Dodge Daytonas and Plymouth Superbirds were modified for drag racing. Of less than 2,000 of these Plymouth Superbirds, there were only about 100 Hemi cars. This particular car was ordered in B5 blue with wide interior. It had a bench seat and a column shifter, and it had that famous 426, 425 horsepower Hemi engine with a 727 automatic transmission. The car was ordered by Karl Gould Chrysler Plymouth in Vestel, New York, and the intention was to go drag racing from day one. And they put super stock driver Tim Richards behind the wheel. Tim Richards would go on to be a championship-winning crew chief for several drivers, including Joe Amato. Paul Messimer is noted as the car's original owner, but it's unclear whether or not he ever drove the car in competition. Paul was an employee at Karl Gould Chrysler Plymouth, and he worked directly with Tim Richards to put together a killer combination for this car. Before the car hit the track in 1970, it received a custom paint job by Bob Gertis at Circus Custom Paint. And then it had gold Karl Gould lettering down the side of the car. You can see Chrysler Plymouth there on the quarter panels. This thing had a cool 1970 look. You can see the stance is cool. It's got Keystone front runners, black steel wheels on the back with some big slicks on there. And with this car's hefty weight of nearly 4,000 pounds and a 425 horsepower rating from the factory, this power to weight ratio placed the car in the E classification of Superstock. But before the car ever hit the track, it underwent some serious work. With less than 10 miles on the odometer, the original R-code Hemi was pulled out of it and replaced with a Superstock legal race-prepped Hemi from Sox and Martin. Tim built the 727 automatic transmission to withstand the drag racing abuse and likely changed the rear end gears for a max effort combination through the quarter mile. The car was originally built with an 8 3/4 rear end as evidenced by the build sheet, but was later changed to a Dana 60 with 488 gears. The Superstock E automatic class was highly contested and was dominated by a big block Chevelle convertible raced by Ray Allen. Now this car found every gray area of the rule book and it was a winner. Chrysler knew this car all too well as it was putting its best combinations on the trailer on a regular basis. While there would ultimately be several Superbird drag cars across the country, there were three notable examples that jumped into the ring against the Ray Allen Chevelle. The Karl Gould Superbird was one of those cars. The car's absolute highlight was its class victory at the 1970 NHRA Summernationals at US30 Dragway in York, Pennsylvania. The car raced several other times in 1970, including a trip to Indianapolis for the US Nationals. You can see a shot of it here going through the traps at Indy with the Ray Allen Chevelle beating it to the stripe by a couple of car lengths. Now, even though that Ray Allen Chevelle was full of superstock tricks that pushed the boundaries of the rulebook, this Superbird had a couple of tricks too. The rear glass in this car is double thick to add a little bit of weight over the rear tires, and then they added over 100 pounds of lead wool inside of those big wings. Those wings are already pretty heavy because they're made out of die-cast metal, so when you put 100 pounds of lead in there, these things really added a lot of ballast and a lot of weight over those rear tires. Even though this car had some good tricks, it didn't have near as many tricks as one of the other Superbirds that raced in Superstock E Automatic. Now that car belonged to Jack Wurst. Now that car had an altered wheelbase. They pushed the rear end forward a couple inches. They actually altered the front wheelbase as well by staggering the front wheels. That was to give an advantage at the starting line and the finish line beams. And then they moved the engine back, and that car had some creative weight ballast as well. So this thing was completely illegal, and it had a special 500 plus cubic inch Hemi under the hood. Now the rule books were really strict in NHRA Superstock, and the tech officials were also really strict. So if this car, the Jack Wurst car, were to ever win a race, he would be tore down and inspected. They never did because that car never won a race. He intentionally red lighted against Ray Allen's Chevelle and beat the car but lost the race. and that was intentional so that he didn't get tore down by the NHRA tech officials. And by that point, the car had proven its point and moved on to other owners and into other classes. So that was just a little taste of the Jack Wurst car. Let's get back into the Karl Gould car. So after a successful 1970 season, the Karl Gould Superbird was sold in 1971 to the Carpinet brothers. Now, these guys were pretty young and they were eager to get out there in superstock competition, and they raced the Superbird under the name Infamy. Now, they kept the stripe job that was done by Circus and then added their own lettering there, as we can see in this one picture in this configuration. Not many pictures exist of this car with this different lettering, because the very next year they painted this car, a brand new paint job. You can see it in these pictures. Again, these are pretty rare pictures as well. This car was painted white and it had some custom striping that you can see here, but overall you can still see that this thing is set up for drag racing, even though it doesn't have the big lettering and the decals and things that it had the year prior. Around 1973, the Carpinet brothers moved on to another drag car and sold this one to Frank Obitz, who commissioned a guy known as Hank Z to do a complete repaint on it, and he gave it this psychedelic paint job that we see on this car today. So this thing has some cool striping, great color combinations, and a really cool mural on the back that we can see right here. This car has a lot of character and a lot of personality, but unfortunately we don't have any pictures of this car in its heyday with this paint job. Now, we do have pictures of the car as it was discovered. We can see it here. It obviously doesn't have an engine in it. You can see the car sitting up real high, but it does have this psychedelic paint job on it. Now, this car was stashed away, obviously, for many years because the paint is just about flawless. You can't find very many flaws on this thing. It's so cool. It's got a great finish on it. Even though it's got all this age and all of this character, it still has a cool shine to it. So while Frank Obitz owned it, he pulled the Hemi out of it, put a 440 in its place. And it's not known if Frank ever drag raced this car in this configuration or how long it was even operational. It was later sold to Michael Roman, and then he sold it to Cy Behrens, who stashed this car away for many years. And most of the time this car lived in Pennsylvania. But then Mike Hill discovered this car and made an offer and was able to buy it in 2014. Now, he installed a period correct Hemi and K-member. He put this car back together into somewhat of an operational state, and he took the car around to a lot of different shows, including MCACN in Chicago, which is a perfect home for a car of this nature. A barn find, a survivor, a rare muscle car, an old drag car, psychedelic paint job. This thing had it all. It had every bit of wow factor that you want when you go to the MCACN show. This thing was the hit of the show, and so much so that it was built into a die-cast car. Actually, 2 different die-cast companies built replicas of this car. So it was a major hit. It was all over the internet, and it was just a super cool piece, and Mike did a great job of piecing together the history of this thing. Even though there were some pieces like that Sox and Martin Hemi engine that he couldn't quite track down, this thing had so much cool history and a lot of great pictures to back it up. Ultimately, Mike sold the Superbird to another collector, Bob Jennings from Indiana. Bob and his crew have addressed some of the mechanical issues that this car had, but left the 1974 Hank Z paint job on it and retained the killer Day 2 tire and wheel setup with the jacked up rear suspension, the skinny keystones. I mean, this thing's got the perfect 70s look. I was able to see this car in person at the NHRA Street Rod Nationals in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was blown away. 50 years of age give this thing the ultimate old school look, and I was shocked to learn that it was a super stock legal drag car before its psychedelic days. Just like any old drag car or any kind of car that has some cool history, this thing could have got sideways real quick. If this thing had ended up in the wrong hands, it would have likely been restored back to stock because it's such a rare and valuable car. Hemi Superbird with 1,500 miles on it, that would be a big dollar car anywhere you go. And in the case of Bob Jennings, he's got a building full of Dodge Daytonas and Plymouth Superbirds, most of which are restored to stock, or some of them are completely original. So the idea of keeping this thing as a psychedelic 70s drag car or street machine is exactly what he plans to do. He's ironed out the rest of the details on this thing mechanically. It's completely operational, even though it's not quite street legal with open headers and those big slicks. It's still a really cool piece that he gets out, he cranks up on a regular basis, takes to shows, and shares this car's history. He even painted his Dodge Ramp truck to match this car so that he'd have a really cool looking combination going down the road. Bob has a YouTube channel with several videos on this car and a lot of other content on his other cars. So if you want to go check that out, you can even hear this thing run. You can go do that at Jennings Wing Cars here on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed following along the history on this wild Plymouth Superbird. Thank you for watching.